Hi, welcome to Drinkosaurus, where we take ancient cocktails into the modern era. My name's Matt, I'm your host, and let's get drinking. In today's episode, we're going to continue the beginner bar series, where I'm going to give you some ingredients to buy for under $100 and give you a bunch of different drink options to make. It's always difficult starting your own bar just because alcohol is expensive and there's a ton of it. But hopefully through this episode, it'll give you some ideas on ingredients to purchase so you can start building up your own bar at home. As you can probably tell, this episode is focused around gin, where our first one was focused around rye as a primary spirit. What we're going to do in this episode is I'm going to first talk about gin, just because there's a lot of options that you can purchase, and I want to make sure that you purchase one that's right for you. And in contrast to the different episode where it was just 5 ingredients and 5 cocktails, there's so many options with gin that I'm going to give you some different choose your own adventure paths that you can go down based on what your taste preferences and your budget is. I will warn you, there's a lot of information in this episode, so feel free to pause it. What? Where did that come from? It's the Pierre Ferrand coming back. Just as a little disclaimer, this episode will have a lot of information, so feel free to pause the video at any point just so you can look at the information on screen. I don't have enough time to go through everything in detail, but hopefully this will be like a reference guide for you in making your different cocktails. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about gin and give you some options on which gin is best for you. Unlike rye or bourbon, which we talked about in previous episodes, the definition of gin is pretty open, both legally and colloquially. Put most basically, gin is any neutral spirit that has been flavored with a variety of botanicals, and typically the main botanical is juniper berry, which if you've ever had gin, that's what gives it its piney, foresty sort of flavor. Otherwise, just like most spirits, it has to be distilled to either 75 or 80 proof, depending on where in the world you're at. And aside from that, really, those are the basics, and a lot of different distillers, especially new craft distillers, have really stretched that definition in terms of what botanicals they use. Just like with most spirits, there's different types of gin. I won't go into too much detail with them because honestly, I don't drink enough gin or the different varieties of gin to know the difference. But this might help you narrow down what you're looking for. So the most popular one that most people have heard of is London Dry Gin. If you think of the first brand of gin that pops into your head, it's probably a London Dry Gin. London Dry Gins were made in London. Yay! I did that research for you. London Dry Gins are most characterized because they're full force juniper berry. So any popular brands like Tanqueray, Beefeater, Bombay is a London Dry Gin. Usually it'll say it on the bottle. So this one says London Dry Gin. And that's your default, when you think of gin, that's probably what people are referring to. If you purchase a London Dry Gin, it's a pretty safe option. Your gin drinks will probably taste as they were meant to be, because most of these cocktails, especially the classics ones, are made with London Dry Gin in mind. There are some other varieties. For example, there's Plymouth Gin, which is very similar. It's a little bit less emphasized on the juniper berry and has more citrus notes to it. There's Old Tom Gin, which moves even more away from the juniper. There's Geneva Gin, which is a lot more rich. There's a lot of options, but usually the way I classify the difference between them are your juniper berry forward gins, which are the ones that I listed, and then American gins. So basically what American gins are when a whole bunch of different distilleries in the US were making gin, they were like, juniper berry, that's nice, but we're gonna put in a whole bunch of other stuff too. So out of my gins here, the only London Dry Gin is this long extinct, really large, uncomfortably so bottle of Bombay, but a lot of these other ones, especially through here, are all American gins. I just like them because I like the variety. And I honestly can't really tell much difference between the other ones listed. Another option for gin, if you're more of a whiskey drinker and you prefer those flavors, is to go with a barrel-aged gin. You can tell because it's not clear. So these have been gins that have been aged in oak barrels or different wood barrels, and that gives it a more whiskey characteristic to it. I like these kind of on their own. They hold up to just drinking them neat, but they also can be substituted for different whiskeys. I won't tell you which one to get, I'll leave it up to you, but I recommend getting one in like the $30 to $35 range. Usually that's guaranteed to be something that'll be of quality without breaking the bank too much. If I did recommend a gin, the one that I like to use the most is Aviation Gin. It's distilled in California. It's an American gin, and it's a good balance of like juniper notes and floral notes, and it doesn't steal the show. Sometimes if you put gin in a cocktail, it's like juniper berry, but this one plays nice, and I'm gonna smell it. You know, all of these are great. Nothing against gin, but I'm so used to smelling hand sanitizer that gin kind of smells like hand sanitizer. Or hand sanitizer smells like gin, either way. Whenever I sanitize my hands, I get a little bit thirsty. I don't know if is that a problem. Hopefully this was enough information to get you thinking about what gin is best for you. We're gonna move on to talking about other ingredients to get, but for now, I'm gonna clear the table of this gin because frankly, I'm feeling a little bit outnumbered here. So, before listing the specific things in this episode, there's a few at-home items that I recommend having, and these are things that you would normally have in any home bar. So I'm gonna split them into two categories. One are more food items, and the others are just bar basics. In terms of the food items, I always recommend having the 3 main citrus available to you, so that would be lime, lemon, and orange. These are good if you want citrus in your drink, but also good for garnishing as well. Also in this category, I'll include like club soda or seltzer, just a non-flavored seltzer, having that around. If you ever want to have a drink that's more of a mixed drink rather than a straight up cocktail. In terms of the bar basics items, I recommend having tonic water. Well, not really. If you like gin and tonics, have tonic water. I don't use it for anything else. So maybe have tonic water if you're into that. Also having simple syrup, which you can buy at the store, but you can just make at home. If you just take like equal parts water and sugar, put it in a pot, give it a little mix. It's great. You can make it at home. But if you want to buy it at the store, that's fine too. And also having Angostura bitters and orange bitters. If you followed our last bar builder episode, you already have some Angostura bitters, but orange bitters are probably the second most commonly used one, and they'll be used in drinks today. These are the big versions of it. You can get them pretty small. These are our basic items. Some of the cocktails I'm going to mention today require these, and these are just good things to have on hand. So with the basics out of the way, let's start with our first choose your own adventure. You don't get to choose yet because the first one is kind of foundational. So let's start with our first branch, which is the basic gin branch. So the main things you'll need, first of all, is your gin. I'll just be using Aviation Gin as our stand-in, but remember, pick whatever one you want. And we only really need one extra ingredient to make our first 4 drinks. But I'm gonna be, just like with the gin, I was a little bit ambiguous. This one might be ambiguous too. Once again, it depends on what you're after, what your goals are. But I would say also having some sort of dry vermouth. I'm not gonna leave it that clear cut though, because there's a lot of like dry vermouth adjacent ingredients that are called upon for cocktails as much as dry vermouth, and in some of our cocktails today, depending on which one you choose, you might have to substitute it, but I just wanna give you some options. So another option is a blanc vermouth, which is a little bit sweeter than a dry vermouth. So if your palate is more sweeter, more lighter, a blanc vermouth might be good. And you can also get an aperitif that's very similar. So Lillet Blanc is sweeter than a dry vermouth, but also is called upon quite a bit for different cocktails. So here would be my recommendation. If you like martinis and are passionate about martinis and want to have a martini and want people to see you drinking a martini, get the dry vermouth. Dry vermouth is the staple for the martini, and it's one of the ingredients we're going to talk about. If not, though, I would maybe lean toward Lillet or its counterpart, Cochi Americano. I don't have any, it was camera shy today. Just because you usually see those more in cocktails. But I'll leave it to you. You can try the different ones. If you're more into cocktails, you have a better idea of which one of these you like. It does change the drink around a bit, but if you're just getting started, pick one or whatever one you see in the store. Once again, just a reminder for vermouths, spending a little bit more on them is usually a good option. These are like the super cheap versions. I don't drink them enough, so I don't really care. But if you're, like I said, if you're wanting like a really good martini, spend a little bit more on that dry vermouth. So the question now is, what can we make with these ingredients? With these starter pack ingredients, we can make 4 different cocktails, and these are all classics and probably ones you've heard of before. The first one is the martini, which is just a combination of our gin and our dry vermouth. And some olives if you want to garnish it that way. The second one is a gimlet, which is a combination of our gin, our simple syrup, and our lime. So those are 2 of the ingredients for like your bar basics. The next one is a Tom Collins, which is a combination of our gin, simple syrup, lemon juice, and our seltzer or club soda. As you can see, a lot of gin drinks require some of those more basic around the house elements. And our fourth one is a gin and tonic. Can you guess what is in a gin and tonic? You guessed it, bourbon. Just kidding, it's gin and tonic. The good thing about this starter pack, as it is so far, if you have about a $30 gin and let's say a $10 to $15 vermouth, you can make a lot of drinks that people have heard of, will like, and will request, just with 2 simple ingredients and stuff you'll have around the house. But this is where it gets interesting, because if you purchase just a few more ingredients, it opens up your options quite a bit. So now you get to choose. Will you go on the more fruity citrus path or the more bitter herbal path? Click now. Just kidding, you don't get to choose. We're gonna go this way first. That would be too hard to do. So let's go down the fruit hole. Damn it, Matt. I was like, don't say hole. What's a fruit hole? Let's talk about some more ingredients that you can get to make 4 more different cocktails that have a more citrus and fruity theme. The first one, and this isn't just good for this video, like this ingredient comes up in a lot of different cocktails, is Luxardo Maraschino liqueur, which is a cherry liqueur, and it's super, super, super tasty. This is the like full-size bottle, but I strongly recommend, if you can, getting the 375 milliliter one, which you can get for around $20. This way, if you drink it and you're like, this is garbage, you only have like a little bit. So for a lot of these, I recommend getting the smaller version, just so you can just make sure you like them first and you're not committed to having a whole bottle of stuff that you don't like. The second item is a sweet vermouth. And if you already stocked up from our previous Bar Builder episode, you already probably have Carpano Antica sweet vermouth. Once again, spending a little bit more on a sweet vermouth, maybe around $15, is a great way to add a lot of quality to your drink. And once again, this is the smaller size vermouth. I always like to get the smaller size just because vermouth the flavor can change over time if you don't use it. If you don't have any sweet vermouth, I actually recommend Via vermouth, which mixes well with gin just because it has more floral characteristics, where the Carpano Antica is a bit more like herbal. I just like this one better for gin. This is my favorite. Sorry. I like you. Babies. Come here. Come here. Come here. Is this how you hold a baby? Hello, baby. This is getting weird. Okay. This last one is optional. Like, we can do a lot with these, but if you want to spice it up, and by spice I mean orange it up, is getting some sort of orange liqueur. So I recommend Cointreau, but I know it's supposed to be like Cointreau. sorry the French. Cointreau? Cointreau. Cointreau is an orange liqueur. Once again, this is the full size. You can get it in the smaller size. You can also get triple sec. The reason triple sec's a more general reference to orange liqueur, but like you can get some really, really bad triple sec that's cheap. So just be careful. You can also get some really, really good triple sec that's expensive. That's too much variation for me, and I'm not a risk taker, so I usually go with Cointreau. Outside of this episode too, this is a very popular ingredient in lots of other cocktails, such as like the Cosmopolitan. With these ingredients, let's talk about 4 more classic and maybe less known classics that you can make. Full disclosure, I usually never make any of these drinks because I don't like the fruity citrus flavors. So you're gonna notice a lot of cuts here because I don't have these cocktail recipes memorized. Starting us off is the Corpse Reviver No. 2, which aside from having the coolest name ever, makes use of our gin, our Cointreau, our Lillet Blanc, or if you want to substitute it with the dry vermouth from before, lemon juice, and technically it has a little bit of absinthe in it, but if you make it without absinthe, if you don't have absinthe or any other like black licorice flavored liqueur, it's gonna be okay. You have my permission to do so. So that's the first one, the Corpse Reviver No. 2. Our next drink is known as the Abbey, which contains our gin, Lillet Blanc, or dry vermouth if you want to mix it up a little bit, some orange juice, and Angostura bitters, I remembered. And you can also add some of the Luxardo Maraschino in there. Following that, we have the Martinez, which Drinkosaurus episode 5, I made a variant on the Martinez, is our gin, our sweet vermouth, and just a little bit of that Luxardo Maraschino. And orange bitters if you want to add those in too. The last cocktail, conveniently, is called the Aviation, which contains gin. And if you make it with Aviation gin, you get like a little achievement unlocked for your life, I guess. No, you don't. Maybe. That would be a sad life. That would be a great life. I don't know. I'm just going to keep doing my job. The Aviation contains our gin. It has our maraschino, Luxardo Maraschino liqueur, some lemon juice. And technically, this one has an ingredient that's not on our list, but I'm pretty sure if you go to like any gift exchange or somebody just buys you a random liqueur, it's going to be like creme de violet, a violet liqueur, which is notoriously used in the Aviation. So if you just have some of that lying around, which like you might think, when am I gonna get that? People just have it. I don't know, it just appears in your cupboard. You can make the drink called the Aviation. So those are 4 different drinks from the sweet branch, and keep in mind, these are just 4 that I know of and looked up. There's lots of different variants you can make already. Now let's move to the more bitter and herbal branch, which is my preferred branch, and I really like these cocktails a lot, so I'm excited to talk about these. Transition! In terms of our bitter and herbal branch, our first 2 ingredients are actually the same that we used from the previous Choose Your Own Adventure. So you should go watch that because I'm not going to say it twice. But getting yourself Luxardo Maraschino, it's a cherry liqueur, and your sweet vermouth. So these 2 are the same between the 2 branches, but instead of adding Cointreau, we're going to branch off a little bit. So the main new ingredient is green chartreuse, which is probably one of my favorite things in the world. Sorry, Mom and Dad, I like green chartreuse. Once again, as I've been recommending, start with the 375 one because green chartreuse is expensive. It's great, but it's expensive. So like a full-size bottle like this might run you $50, which is a lot, maybe too much, especially if you don't like it. So start with the 375. It should probably get you about $30. And once bars open up, when that ever happens, please, ask the bartender for like a little sample. So if you see green chartreuse, play it coy. Be like, wow, I wonder what that green chartreuse tastes like. If only I could have a sip, and then I would buy a cocktail. They're gonna give you little samples. Always ask for samples. You can try a bunch of little things for free, and it's great. And the last ingredient is Campari, which is a bitter Italian aperitif. And once again, if you've done the rye video, you would already have these 2 ingredients here. So here's the foundation for our other branch of more herbal and bitter flavors. If you bought one of the barrel-aged gins, I would say those work better for these. So like lighter, more floral, citrus, and darker, more herbal and intense flavors. So let's wrap up and talk about the 4 different cocktails we can make from these ingredients. Starting off, the bitter and herbal branch is one of my favorite cocktails known as the Last Word, which combines our gin, some lime juice, our Luxardo Maraschino, and our green chartreuse. It's like a really great cocktail. You should try it. Otherwise, what we can make is another drink, also one of my favorites, called a bijou. Bijou? This. And that combines our gin, our green chartreuse, and our sweet vermouth, and it has a little bit of orange bitters and the Luxardo Maraschino as well. If you want to get fancy, what you can do is you can take your Campari, put a little bit in, give it a little zhuzh, and it becomes a drink called a tailspin. So look, 2 drinks for the price of 1, but really we consider them 1 because 1 just has a Campari wash. One of the most classic drinks is the Negroni, which you can make with these ingredients, specifically your gin, your sweet vermouth, and your Campari. Finally, if you had some ingredients from the fruity sweet area, specifically the orange liqueur or Cointreau, you can make a drink called a See, I'm gonna say it in a weird voice so I don't have to pronounce it correctly. Honey, please bring me the Luschengaden. I want to drink the Luschengaden. It's a drink I'd never heard of, but doing some research for this, it uses the ingredients that we have. Specifically, it uses gin, Campari, Cointreau, and dry vermouth. As you can see, once we start adding more ingredients, the options just become bigger and bigger and bigger. And planning this episode was really difficult because as soon as I would think of one ingredient, I'm like, wait, if this goes with this, and then we can make this other cocktail. And basically it was like one of those stereotypical like murder scenes where you have like different pictures and then like all the red lines connecting it. That's basically what my script looked like. That was a lot of information and you might have some questions, but the best place to ask those questions are down in the comments because that will be a good guide for me to plan my future videos. Like, I don't know what you want. I like talking about what I want, but that's selfish. So put those comments down there to guide me to meet your needs for future videos. Drinkosaurus is a production of Little Giant Monsters. If you want to see what other projects we're working on, check the description below for our different social media platforms and our website. If you really like what we're doing and want to support us more, please consider doing so on Patreon, just like these wonderful people. Especially that one and that one, all of them. They're all great. That's, well, COVID, sorry. That's all for today's episode. Good luck shopping. Good luck getting ingredients. Let me know if you have any questions. I will answer them promptly. And as always, have fun and and as always, drink responsibly. Bye.